Hello friends, welcome back. I am Rajneesh and today in this session we are going to understand how to install a Linux machine or a Linux server. So this is going to be your first lab in the RHCE session where you install an operating system which is RHEL 6 or CentOS thing, and you set the network parameters to it. And yeah, so this is my test VM that I have created using VM VirtualBox, Oracle VirtualBox. So this is a free application which is available both for Linux and Windows, and you can install it on your desktop to install the virtual machines and you can work on them. This is actually a good tool. So till now what I have done is I have just created a vanilla test VM, or let's do one thing. Let's create a new VM so that you get to understand how we work with virtual machines on Oracle VirtualBox. So I just click on new. The name of the virtual machine, let's take it desk 8. The operating system is going to be Linux, Red Hat 64-bit. Click on next. The amount of RAM you want to provide it, I'm going to give it 1 GB RAM. Click on next. So create a new hard disk. Click on next. The kind of disk that it is going to create, VDI by default, so that is fine for us. Dynamically allocated means if I'm going to create 10 GB of disk, the actual utilization on my file system is not going to be 10 GB, rather it may be up to 4 GB or whichever space my operating system is using. And fixed size says in case I am creating 10 GB disk, it will initially use 10 GB and continue to use 10 GB even in case the virtual machine is actually using 4 GB of disk space. So it's good to create a dynamically allocated storage, or in other words, in terms of VMware, we say it's thin provisioning. Click on next. Desk 8. For me, 5 GB is enough. So this is the size of the hard disk, that virtual hard disk that it is going to create. Click on next, create, and create. Now let's power it on or click on start. Welcome to the first run wizard. Because the operating system has not yet been installed on it, so it's providing me an option to run the first run wizard. Click on next. Media source, so where is the operating system? It's present on the virtual disk CentOS 6.3. I select it, or you can select using that folder button to select where the operating system is residing or the ISO image is residing. The first option, host drive, says it's inserted to your laptop or desktop. This is the ISO that we are using. Click on next, click on start. Okay, switch to full screen. Okay, so here you can see that you have few options: install or upgrade an existing system, which says either install the operating system on it. In case it exists, you may reinstall it or upgrade it. The same happens in case you have basic video drivers. Rescue installed system. This option is used when your master boot record or the grub is corrupted. So finally you are into a situation in which you will have you are not able to boot from the hard disk. So you are using this ISO image or your RHEL DVD to boot in the rescue mode, so you can repair your grub menu. The example scenario could be you have installed RHEL on your operating system, and after that, to make it dual boot, you installed Windows, and Windows finally wrote to the MBR and replaced the grub that was already installed. So you are not able to boot anymore into RHEL. So what you can do is you can insert a DVD of RHEL and you can just boot it in the rescue mode and reinstall the grub. We'll have a different session for that. Boot from local drive. It means that you are booting from the hard disk rather than from the CD. So it's the same as you took out CD and you started booting your server from hard disk. Memory test to make certain checks on RAM whether that is working fine. So this lab is about the installation of the operating system. So you can select either first or second option. Second works for most of the cases because it uses basic video driver. So I just select second and press enter. So it's booting from the CD drive, creating and mounting appropriate partitions. So first thing it says, I have found a media in which the operating system is present. Do you want to check media for any kind of errors? You can click on OK on check it, and it may take a couple of minutes. For me, I have already tested it, so I am going to skip it. So here is the welcome screen. I click on next. You can select your language. For me it's English, the default one. I click on next. The keyboard, for me US English is fine. You can select your keyboard and click on next. Now we have two options of the disk. As we are going to install the operating system, so it simply says there is some kind of secondary storage on which the operating system is installing. It could be your direct attached storage, which means that the hard disk is present inside your cabinet and directly attached to your server. The second option could be specialized storage devices, which says the storage device is not directly attached, rather it's coming through a SAN. It could be through fiber channel SCSI, or it could be through iSCSI. So for our lab, we are installing it on a basic storage device, which is the SCSI disk attached to my server. So first one, the default, works fine for me. I click on next. It says the storage device below may contain data, but it's not able to detect any kind of file system on it. Should we format it? In case you have any kind of data on it, you should not format it before taking any kind of backup. So take a backup. For my scenario, this is a blank hard disk, so I agree on it and I allow it to format. Apply to all choices. Apply my choice to all the devices with undetected file system. For me it works. For your case, make sure that you have backed up all the data from your laptop or hard disk or this virtual disk in case you have data in it. For me it works fine. Yes, discard any data and create a file system on it. Now the host name, for me it is going to be desk8.labs.local, and second part is the networking. Configure network, yes. I click on EDH0, connect automatically, yes, so that every time the system boots the network interface should be up. I want IPv4, and my environment is using static IPs, so I'll use manual. IP address 192.168.100.8. netmask is /24, works fine. Gateway is 192.168.100.1, and DNS server is 192.168.100.2 and 192.168.1.1. Search domains. My domain is labs.local. And now click on close. Click on next. System clock uses UTC. No in my case, because at the back end my operating system is using IST. I select my country or time zone, which is Asia Calcutta. Provide it a password. It should be strong enough. For this test machine I used a simple password which I should not. So this is fine. Now, which type of installation do you want? Use all space simply says whatever is presently installed on the hard disk will all be swapped up. It will all be cleaned up. The hard disk will be reformatted and you will lose any kind of data present on your hard disk. Replace existing Linux system, which says in case the operating system is installed on this hard disk, it is going to replace any extended partition ext3, ext4 which are present on it, but it is not going to have any impact on Windows file system, whether that's vfat, FAT32, NTFS. They'll not be touched. Shrink current file system. In case you don't have space, you can shrink the present file systems and you can clean up and free up some disk space on which you can install Linux. Use free space. In case you have free space present on the disk, you can select this option and start working on it. The best option is create custom layout, in which you have lot more options. Here we have the disk and it displays we have only one disk, which is SDA. So the first partition that must be present and on which we'll have grub and the boot images present is boot partition. So I create it. The size of the boot partition 200 MB is much, so I click on OK. Now I click on create once again, and now my approach while creating the partitions is going to be using logical volumes. The reason is logical volumes can be extended on the fly without rebooting the system. In case you can attach the hard disks to it without powering it down. Okay, let me tell it the other way. If we are talking about logical volume management, it is a kind of flexible volume group which is created, which can be increased on the fly by addition of hard disks. And then from the volume group you can increase the size of existing logical volume, or you can add additional logical volumes to it. And resize or increase in size can be done on the fly without rebooting the operating system or even without unmounting the file system. Okay, so let me create a physical volume. For physical volume means any volume that is going to be a part of volume group. So in case we have multiple disks, they have SDB, SDC, SDD, we can create physical volumes from all of them and combine them to form a single volume group, which will be more in size. For example, we have 5 hard disks. and we are going to create physical volumes from them, and each hard disk is 100 gigs. So finally the volume group is going to be 500 gigs, and we can create any partition which can be up to 500 gigs. So let's create a physical volume, fill to the maximum allowable size. Now from this physical volume we need to create a volume group. Name VGDesk8 is fine. I click on OK. Now a volume group VGDesk8 has been created, which is right now around 4.9 gigs. You can increase the size of this volume group by addition of more hard disks. If not now, later also. Now from this volume group you are going to create multiple logical volumes in which the actual data is going to reside. So let's create them. Create a logical volume on which the actual data resides. First partition that I am missing is swap. Swap means an extension to your RAM in case you have 2 GB of RAM and there is some kind of scenario in which your application needs 3 GB of RAM. So the additional RAM will be fetched from swap. In the other words, the application which is not active will be swapped out into the swap space, and you will be able to run the applications which are requiring even more than your physical RAM. We have 2 GB of RAM, but we can run the applications of nearly 3 GB, and this one additional 1 GB will be fetched from the hard disk that we are creating right now as swap. And here one thing you see is mount point is none, because this is not mounted as any kind of file system, rather it's a different file system which is swap. So what should be the size? Rule of thumb says it should be twice that of RAM, and it may go up to 8 GB RAM, 8 GB swap, which is fair enough. Because finally when we are using hard disk as a swap, then that is definitely going to be slower as compared to what the actual RAM speed has. So 8 GB is more than enough, even in case you have 64 gigs of RAM in your server. Click on it. So I created a swap. The name was not pretty clear, so let me change it to swap. This is just for naming purpose so that anyone can understand it clearly. Create an LVM logical volume which is going to use all the rest of the disk space which is present. ext4, the name is going to be root, will be mounted on slash. Click on OK and click on next. Now we have the 3 partitions, one is root, one is swap, and one is boot. And the root partition is flexible. In case the complete disk space has been utilized, we can add additional disk space. We'll then be adding that new disk to the volume group and then effectively increasing the root partition. We'll have a video for that. Format it. All the data will be lost. Yes. Write changes to disk. So it's creating the partitions in it. Install a bootloader on dev.sta. There are 2 options in which you can install your grub or the bootloader. Either it could be present on the MBR. If we are talking about any hard disk, it has single master boot record present, but the second option that it is displaying is dev.sda1, which is the first sector of boot partition, which exists for every partition that you are creating. So the best place, if you want to manage all the operating system, is to install it on the master boot record and you can manage the booting of different operating system. So in most of the cases you have to install it on the master boot record. So select MBR. Okay, use a bootloader password. Okay, I have set a password to bootloader. This means that whenever I am going to modify anything in the bootloader, I cannot modify anything, or I cannot boot it in the previous operating system. I cannot boot it in a single user mode without providing it the password. But the current setup, or the current image, or the current state of the operating system can be booted without providing the password. Means, in case I am trying to modify anything on the grub bootloader, when it displays, I cannot modify, but the normal sequence of boot process will work fine. In case I want to modify anything in the grub, want to boot it in a particular user mode, I need to provide the password. In case you have multiple operating system, they could be displayed over here, and you can set the default. You can click on edit, and if you want to rename it to something else, for example CentOS 6.3, you can just modify the label and click on OK. But the default works. Click on next. Now it's trying to fetch out the details of the operating system. You can add additional repositories or internet repository to it. Right now the option is minimal, so that minimal packages will be installed. You can install desktop, minimum desktop, or you have different options for if. But if you are talking about a server, it should be installed with the minimum packages. Customize now, it will show you a list of packages that it's actually installing. So it's not installing any kind of additional packages. Here you can see it's not selected anything. We'll be manually installing the required packages later. Here all is blank, so click on next. So now the minimum packages will be installed on the server which are required to run the operating system. This serves multiple purposes. First of all, the packages that are not required, why should we install them in case they are using extra spaces? Additionally, in case we are installing additional packages and running them, it could lead to vulnerability in a package which is not actually required on the system but is present on it. And the most important, GUI should not be installed on the servers, because first thing is it provides you a GUI, or in case it has any kind of vulnerability, it can be accessed from the remote. Secondly, it makes use of additional RAM for the GUI. It's not big amount, but yes, definitely, why should we waste for GUI? And with GUI it will require a lot of additional packages, additional disk space. So almost all the packages are installed. Going to take around 1 minute. Okay, the last package, and after that it's going to install the grub on the master boot record with the password that we set for it. And after the installation is complete, it is going to ask us to reboot it. Okay, post installation, installing the bootloader. Okay, now you need to reboot it. I just click on reboot. I just press downwards arrow key and let me try to edit if I can edit anything. Edit, pressing E makes it to the edit mode, but it didn't work. The reason being I need to provide a password, and to provide password I'll have to press P. Here I enter the password, and now I can use E to edit it. And if I want to move to a single user mode, I'll just add 1 at the end, which I don't actually want. The objective was to show you that nothing can be modified without providing it the password. So let's just press enter and let it boot. Okay, so here the system is about to boot. Password is root. So I'm into the server. Make sure that you have proper entry in etc host for it. Okay, VIM is not there, but VI is there. IP address is 192.168.100.8, goes to desk 8.labs.local, desk 8, which is a nickname, write and quit. If config, make sure that networking has been configured. Yes, it has been configured. Fine. Make sure that you are able to ping the default gateway 100.1. You are not able to ping it. Let me see the reason. View, and here if I go to the networking, I can see that it's attached to a NAT interface. Rather, I should attach it to my host only adapter in which I am running this network. I click on OK, and now if I try to ping it, it's still, yeah, it has started pinging it. Okay, let me see if I can ping yahoo.com. Yes, I can go to the internet. Means my networking is working fine. Okay, so my networking is working fine. For hostname, /etc sysconfig network scripts if cfg dash interface name is a file attached with the configuration of that particular interface. Device means the name of the device. Boot proto, does it have to boot from DHCP? None means we'll be providing static IP address. NM control, network manager control, do you want to manage it through network controller? No. On boot, yes. So we are all fine with it. Most important things is IP ADDR. IP address, prefix, gateway, and your DNS servers. So networking is fine, and your generic CentOS 6 has been installed on it. So that's all for today's video. Have a good day.